Good morning, everyone. It's good to be here with you. And I hope that Bo is enjoying his Father's Day with his family. And we just think about all the fathers this day. You may have seen on the Facebook page and what was sent out that I talked about a word, gobsmacked. I want to give you a little bit of history about that word. It comes, and you may already know this, but it comes from England and Scotland, and it's slang, and they use it to express extreme shock. And based on just the word itself, feeling gobsmacked is sort of the equivalent to feeling like you've been hit in the mouth, because gob is slang for mouth and smack means to hit. And what it reminded me of, from the movie Home Alone, when he does like that, to me that's gobsmacked and how we might react. But you really aren't supposed to use gobsmacked just any time. It really calls attention to the fact that you were completely not expecting what has happened. And so I think that for the past few months, we have all felt a bit gobsmacked by everything that's happening around us and even within us. So let us turn to God in prayer this morning and let us ask. Will you pray? What is it, Holy One, that you want us to learn from these past few months? What is it that you need us to hear, that you need us to do? Guide our hearts and our minds in this time to hear your voice, to hear your call, and to follow. Amen. In last week's passage and in today's passage, Jesus is preparing to send his disciples out into the mission field. He is giving them advice about what they might encounter. And he warns them that they're going to face opposition, maybe even violence. But he expects them, despite this opposition, despite the fear of violence, to get the job done. And our text for today is sort of a bad news, good news send-off speech by Jesus. The bad news that, there is going to be that opposition and violence. But the good news is that they can depend on God to give them the words that they will speak. So hear the gospel message today from Matthew chapter 10, verses 24 through 39. A disciple is not above the teacher, nor a slave above the master. It is enough for the disciple to be like the teacher and the slave like the master. If they have called the master of the house Beelzebul, how much more will they malign those of his household? So have no fear of them, for nothing is covered up that will not be uncovered, and nothing secret that will not become known. What I say to you in the dark, tell in the light. And what you hear whispered, proclaim from the housetops. Do not fear those who kill the body, but cannot kill the soul. Rather fear him who can destroy both soul and body in hell. Are not 2 sparrows sold for a penny? Yet not one of them will fall to the ground apart from your Father. And even the hairs of your head are all counted. So do not be afraid. You are of more value than many sparrows. Everyone, therefore, who acknowledges me before others, I will also acknowledge before my Father in heaven. But whoever denies me before others, I will also deny before my Father in heaven. Do not think that I have come to bring peace to the earth. I have not come to bring peace, but a sword. For I have come to set a man against his father, and a daughter against her mother, and a daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law. And one's foes will be members of one's own household. Whoever loves father or mother more than me is not worthy of me. And whoever loves son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me. And whoever does not take up the cross and follow me is not worthy of me. Those who find their life will lose it, and those who lose their life for my sake will find it. May God bless the reading and the hearing of the word. Thanks be to God. Those are very strong words coming from Jesus, but he also gives comfort. This past week, you may have heard that Marge Carpenter, who was a former moderator of the 207th General Assembly of the Presbyterian Church, died, and Marge was 93. Now, Marge came from Big Spring, Texas. And that sounds like the kind of place that a great storyteller would come from. And guess what? Marge was a fantastic storyteller. She even wrote them down and published a book. But every time she spoke, she always had a story to share. And I was reminded of one of her stories this past week. And I want to share it with you because I think it's something we all need to hear. And just a warning, my Texas accent will probably come through pretty strong. In 1864, the states were at war with each other. It was an ugly time, and even the Presbyterian Church was divided in two. The Southern Church was known as the Presbyterian Church in the Confederate States of America. The Northern Church was the Presbyterian Church in the United States of America. And in spite of the war, each branch of the church met for their annual General Assembly. And just a side note, our General Assembly is meeting right now, and they're meeting virtually by Zoom, just like we are. But we called it the Southern Church, met in Charlotte, North Carolina, and the Northern Church met in Newark, New Jersey. Now get this picture. While ministers and elders were deliberating on church policy, homes were being burned, church buildings were being ransacked. Presbyterians from both the North and the South were killing each other. And enslaved Presbyterians were considered less than human by the very church people who had taught them to read the Bible. Lord, have mercy. If there were ever excuses not to care for other people It was in 1864. The blood and treasure of a broken nation was being devoted to a brutal war that would take the lives of 222,000 human souls. Now, an important point to remember is this death toll doesn't count the tens of thousands of men, women, and children who died as a result of being treated as human chattel in this country, from the time enslaved Africans arrived in Virginia in 1619 to that point. So here is the interesting thing. During that General Assembly in Charlotte, the commissioners voted to send an additional missionary to Brazil. In spite of the war, in spite of financial hardship, they realized that God was calling them to reach out to the people of Brazil. And nobody said, "Oh, this is not the time." During the General Assembly in Newark, the commissioners voted to send 3 missionaries to Cameroon. And in spite of the war, in spite of the financial hardship, they realized that God was calling them to reach out to the people of Cameroon. Nobody said, "This is not the time." An important point, though, to remember is there were enslaved people in the South whose ancestors had come from Cameroon and other parts of West Africa. And I don't know if the Northern Presbyterians were trying to offer some kind of twisted reparations to the West African cousins in the South by serving their kinfolk back home again. Lord, have mercy. So here's my point. Gobsmacked. The Civil War gobsmacked both the Southern and the Northern Presbyterian churches. Today, we are living in pandemic times with over 118,000 dead just here, and another countless number of people of God, of color, killed since the end of the Civil War by lynchings, both ancient and recently. Our world is on fire, both literally and figuratively, and we have been gobsmacked. We are living in divided times at this very moment. And there is enormous work to do in the now United Presbyterian denomination. There is lamentation to be expressed. And many people are in the church are saying, "Oh no, this is not the time. This is not the time to build affordable housing. This is not the time to provide internet access to all people. This is not the time to grapple with the needs of refugees and immigrants. This is not the time to feed hungry people. This is not the time to provide job training. This is not the time to reach out to our LGBTQ neighbors. This is not the time to address domestic violence. This is not the time to talk about racial justice. But for the love of all that's holy. This is the perfect time. It's the perfect time to do what God has always called us to do. And if there ever was a time, this is it. This is the time to be the church. When Jesus told his disciples, a disciple is not above his teacher, nor a slave above the master. Nothing is covered up that will not be uncovered, and nothing secret that will not become known. Even the hairs on your head are counted. Everyone who acknowledges me before others, I will acknowledge before my Father in heaven. But whoever denies me before others, I will also deny before my Father in heaven. I have not come to bring peace, but a sword. Whoever loves father or mother more than me is not worthy of me. And those who find their life will lose it. And those who lose their life for my sake will find it. Now, we don't hear the disciples say, "Oh, Jesus, now is not the time." No. Jesus is preparing his disciples, and he wants them to carry his words with them as they go out into hostile environments. He wants them to know that even though they will be overwhelmed at times, even gobsmacked, now is the time. This is the time. This is the time for us to do better. I think maybe that's what God is wanting us to hear in this time of COVID, of quarantine. And you know, my favorite sign that I have seen is the church has left the building. Yeah. Jesus has put us out there. And it's the time to take risks for the sake of the gospel of Jesus. We have been taught by Jesus that we must shout what we have heard in the gospel and experienced in our own lives. We must proclaim from the house rooftops of our hearts, regardless of what is happening in the world. This is our resurrection life that began in our baptism. And we are asked to practice that every moment of our lives, in good times and in hard times. When we are alone, when we are with our communities, even when we are gobsmacked. We are asked to witness to the love of God shown to us in the person of Jesus Christ. This is our calling. And folks, this is the time.